Here we go again, y'all. People disseminating bad information leading so many people astray. This is what the article had to say. And then what I'm going to do for you guys again, like I did last time, is I'm going to do the research for y'all so that way we can know the truth. Let's get into it.
Ryan Tillman, real talk, it's the truth.
The media got Friday's headline wrong. The original headline was "Man and Woman Dead, 9 Officers Hurt After Phoenix Ambush." But according to this article, it states that they got the headline wrong. They state the headline should have been "Black Man and Woman Dead. Infant nearly killed by police. 9 officers hurt after Phoenix police ambush. Man during mental health crisis call." This post later went on to say that there was a neighbor that was watching this situation and stated that the officers failed to de-escalate the situation. They later went on to say that every interaction that you have with the Phoenix Police Department is a potential death sentence. So some of you guys are probably wondering what this headline comes to us from. Recently, there was a situation in Phoenix where officers responded to a call for service because they believed somebody was shot inside the location. Let's watch the video that went viral, and then we're going to talk about why this lady's post was so off base and leading so many people astray. Let's take a look.
Come on. You're sucking our own blood. Come on, bro. Come on.
Who's all in the house?
Huh?
Who's all in the house?
It's me.
Who's you?
No. I've been shot. No.
Law enforcement was responding to a report of a woman being shot. When one officer approached to help, he was shot multiple times by the suspect but got away to safety. A man then emerged from the home holding an infant. The baby girl was unharmed and the man was detained.
All right, so before I actually break down the video, let me establish something. This is why this video or this post that this person made was so wrong. They tried to say that the Phoenix police failed in this whole situation because they failed to de-escalate. They were saying that there was a bystander that was filming somewhere in the neighborhood, said that the police department had countless opportunity to de-escalate and they failed to do so. This is so off in so many different ways, and what I'm gonna do, like I did in the post before, I'm gonna do all the research for you so you guys don't have to look anywhere else. This is what happened that day. Now, that day, the officers responded to a call for service because they believed somebody was shot inside the residence. It's also important to know that inside the residence, there was 4 individuals. There were 2 adult males, an adult female, and there was a child inside. There was some type of dating relationship going on between the suspect and one of the other victims that ends up dying. So, what do we know about the suspect that's in play here? The suspect in this situation goes by the name of Morris Richard Jones III. That's the primary suspect, but I really want to identify something because the person that made that post that was just disseminating false information said that he was going through a mental ordeal. Now, first and foremost, how do you know he was going through a mental health crisis? Not to say that he couldn't have been going through a mental health crisis, but how do you know that he was specifically going through a mental health crisis? It's also important to notate that Mr. Jones was an active member of the criminal street gang, the Crips. So that's important because we know that he has a history of violence. Also, in his rap sheet, he has weapons violations, drug violations, an assortment of other things, and he's gone to prison numerous of times. So why is this information important to this scenario? The information is important because this guy has a criminal history. He has a past, and he has a propensity for using violence. So we can't go off and say right away that this is a mental health crisis when we don't even have any other evidence that backs that up. Not to say that it can't be a mental health crisis, but we don't have any other substantial evidence right now that says this was a mental health crisis. Here's what I also want to do for this video. I also want to read to you the alleged statement of this bystander that was in the neighborhood. Now, I say alleged because, again, this was a social media post. I went onto this page. They're obviously about abolishing police and so many other things. So for all I know, this could be a fake person and they're just making this up, or it could be a real person. But I really want to read to you guys the first paragraph of the statement because I think it's important. Let's take a look at it. As a black woman living in South Phoenix, knowing how incompetent police are at de-escalating situations, especially if there's a mental health issue, we knew instantly as the story unfolded that this man would die that night. So we began to pray for the people in the house. I really want to harp on that because how did you know that this person was automatically going to die that night? Is it because you have a bad perception of law enforcement? Is it because you are truly fearful of law enforcement? I don't know. But we can't sit here and say that he was automatically going to die unless he forced the hand, which is what he did that night. Let's continue. Later on in this statement on this post, it goes on to say this. It is very likely that it was police gunfire firing into that home without regard for the injured woman inside is actually what killed her. Again, how do we know that? This shooting just happened the other day. How do we absolutely know that it was police gunfire that killed her? What's even more interesting about this is that they said that there were 2 black people now killed by the violence of the police department. Well, first and foremost, let's ask the question, what brought police to the location in the first place? Let's start there. And I'm going to unpack all this for you guys because I think it's worth noting. So then the person that makes this post goes on to give 2 reasons of why the police department failed to de-escalate. Number 1 was this. There was really no way for someone inside to feel safe to surrender with the way those police officers behaved. They were firing inside that house the entire night, escalating the situation. Well, were they really firing inside the whole night, or was it the suspect inside that initiated this altercation? The original call for service was somebody was shot inside the location. What people also don't realize is that when the first officer arrived on scene, he invited that officer inside of his house, whereupon he was ambushed by the suspect being shot. That officer was later able to flee away from the location when the second responding officer arrived, and that's when it turned into a barricade. So if we're talking about these officers were firing into the house, it was a suspect that fired upon officers initially after already firing on his girlfriend. The second thing that the person that made this post said was the people inside of the location were making rational decisions to let the baby out. How do we know that these were rational decisions? Again, there's a lot of speculation in this post, but what makes me so upset is there's a lot of false information that's being disseminated and people are eating this stuff up like it's the truth. So the post goes on to say that the police failed to take this opportunity to de-escalate, and they actually escalated the situation by rushing to the door and trying to save that baby. And they also said that these police officers are trained to kill. Well, if they were trained to kill, then why didn't they just keep firing on the house and just trying to kill everybody inside? I mean, that's a novel point. If officers are legitimately trained to kill, how come they just didn't keep shooting until everybody was dead? Secondly, if they were trained to kill, why did they rush up and attempt to save the baby, also putting their own life in danger by trying to save that baby? Have we even tried to answer that question? One of the last points I'm going to make before we actually get into the call for service is this. This person went on to say, we must not forget the person carrying the baby out is a black man walking into a swarm of cops who are members of the deadliest police force in the nation, and that they proved it by firing their weapons directly over a baby in a carriage instead of getting the baby out to safety. Now, let's bring something up. When that person brings the baby out, which was a great move by him because he's trying to get the baby to safety. And for those of you guys that don't know, this just so happened to be the victim's brother who brings the baby out. When the officers approached that door to take that baby to safety, it was a suspect who ambushed those officers and started firing at those officers. So what do you expect the officers to do? Run away and not return or try to stop that threat? So most of them obviously ran away, but there was also return fire because they have to stop a threat. They're actively being fired upon. So don't say that this was the officer's fault when that suspect inside is the one that initiated it after those officers tried to take that baby to safety. The post concludes by saying this: my husband and I literally said it was what we imagine it's like to be in a war zone like Gaza, and that it's this type of reality black communities in Phoenix, especially South Phoenix, face every day because of the criminal justice system. Now, I asked the question, one, have you ever been to Gaza? 2, have you ever been to a war zone? And 3, is it really like that every single day that Phoenix police officers are just killing everybody? Because if it was, I'm sure we'd be hearing about it. Let me just give you a brief rundown of what actually happened, because again, I told you guys got the facts for you. Let me give you a brief rundown of what actually occurred so that way we can get rid of this false information. So here's what actually happened that day. Police responded to the location because they got a call for service that somebody was maybe shot inside. The initiating officer responds on scene, and when he gets there, he's actually invited inside by the suspect. Now that officer starts to approach, and as he approaches, he is then ambushed by the primary suspect. The officer is shot and is able to get to safety. His second partner arrives on scene, And when he arrives on scene, obviously the ante's been raised because you have a suspect that's barricaded himself inside that's already shown a propensity for violence and already tried to kill some of you guys. So now what the officers do is they treat it as a surrounding call out, meaning they're going to call everybody out there and they're going to try to call everybody out of the location to get them surrender safely. Why is this part so important? The reason it's so important is because according to that post, it says that the officers failed to de-escalate. Well, if they failed to de-escalate, that means they would have went inside that door ASAP and just tried to get everybody out of there as quickly as they could. But when you do a surrounding call out, that's a form of de-escalation. It's a de-escalatory technique that we will use. So that way we do not have to escalate the situation or create an exigent circumstance where we have to go in there and utilize deadly force. And keep in mind, this is after the suspect utilized deadly force against the officers. So the officers are on scene. They do a surrounding call out. They're out there for, I don't know, Lord knows how long. And as they're out there, the victim's brother comes outside, sets the baby on the floor, and then walks into police custody. Now, he does this peacefully. The officers are able to successfully take him into custody and detain him while they're continuing up the follow-up with this investigation, all while the baby's sitting at the front doorsteps. Now, the officers have a decision to make. You have a baby. I don't know if it's cold outside or not, but you have a baby that's sitting on a front porch of a very hostile environment. Do you let the baby sit there or do you try to go get the baby? Well, obviously, the commanders made a decision to go get the baby, which I think was the right decision. But as they go get that baby, the suspect inside of this location starts with a barrage of gunfire, actually striking 9 officers as they approach to try to take that baby. Think about that. You have a whole bunch of people approaching this house to get a baby to safety, and all officers are struck by this man's reckless gunfire. So the person in the post said that the officers put the baby in danger, but who really put the baby in danger? Who really put the baby in danger was the original suspect in the first place, because he created this environment that now officers have to respond to and try to get everybody out safely. So here's the last thing I really want to highlight before we wrap this video up. The person that made the post tried to say that this was a mental health crisis. There was no way for officers to even know if this was a mental health crisis, because it sounds like they didn't even have any dialogue with this person. The moment the officers responded on scene, he was met with gunfire. You tell me, at what point in time were officers going to know if this was a mental health crisis? Usually anytime I've been involved in a mental health crisis, I get on scene, I'm able to talk to a person, and then I can slowly start to see that this person is dealing with a mental health crisis. These officers never even had that chance, and they made every effort to try to de-escalate the situation by doing a surrounding call out, calling everybody out of the house, trying to make sure everybody surrenders peacefully. The only one that contributed to the death of the victim and themselves was the suspect. The last thing I'll say is that post went on to say that they believe that the officers killed the suspect inside and the female. It was later determined that the suspect inside died from suicide. So we took his own life, and he's also took the life of the victim inside. So don't try to start making something out of nothing. And what makes me so upset and infuriated about posts like this is these people are just gaslighting incidents, trying to make something out of nothing by utilizing race. Because there was black people involved, now we have to utilize this as a way to disseminate our propaganda of dismantling the police, abolishing the police. Abolishing the police, defunding the police are some of the biggest threats to our society. We cannot live in a society without law enforcement. Can we make changes within law enforcement? Absolutely, we can make changes within law enforcement. But when you want to have rhetoric that's talking about abolishing and dismantling police, that's the type of rhetoric that is going to kill our society, and that's what we don't want to live in. You go into any neighborhood and ask the people that live in some of these dangerous neighborhoods, they will all tell you they love the police in their neighborhoods because they're the ones that are actually helping keep it safe. So make sure you guys, anytime you guys see videos like this, send them to me. I'll break them down for you. I'll do the research. I know the research can be cumbersome at times. Let me do that. That's my job. But just make sure anytime you see something like this, call these people out or put a stop to it early, because these people are leading so many other people astray. Thanks again, guys, and God bless.